Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Jeff Dunham returns to Comedy Central this Friday with a new stand-up special called Me the People, which was filmed recently at the historic Warner Theater in Washington, D.C. I spoke to Dunham about his journey as a ventriloquist comedian and how he and his famous puppets are navigating the changing comedy landscape. Hey, Jeff Dunham. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP in D.C.
Jason, thanks for having me. I appreciate being back in DC, although I'm not back in DC, so it's great.
But we're going to be talking about upcoming Comedy Central, and I think it might be on Paramount Plus too, comedy special that you filmed in DC, right? It's Me the People, and it was at Warner Theater, is that right?
Yeah, and it was kind of like full circle because this was my 11th special, and my second special we taped it in fall of '07 at the same theater, and that's when I introduced Ahmed the Dead Terrorist to the world, and things kind of took off for me after that.
DC audiences are the perfect audience for anything political, or it's the perfect audience for that kind of stuff.
I gotta tell you, I mean, people, unless you haven't been on stage, if you haven't been on stage and don't understand this, you can feel the intellect of a crowd by how they laugh. And I'm telling you, I first noticed that back in college when I did a show just off the campus of Tufts University. And that crowd, it wasn't all young college people, but it was a swift, quick crowd. I mean, the laughs came faster. They just got things so quickly. And I got to tell you, that DC audience, they were sharp. They were quick, especially on the Saturday night. It was just hot, 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 hot. So, yeah, I love it there.
Oh yeah, and it's the perfect time with the midterms just happening, or I guess are still happening as they tally everything. But it's when exactly during this period was it filmed? Because we should tell everyone that it's going to air on Friday, November 25th at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
But when exactly was it filmed?
About 5 weeks ago, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it's still contemporary. There's still I like to make my shows evergreen, but at the same time, there's so much going on. How can you not comment on stuff? And that's the other thing about the DC audience is the references there are just boom. They're right there. Unless you're talking about NASCAR, then not so much.
You have to go out to like Bristol, Virginia or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so this particular special, then the one that you just filmed about 5 weeks before now in Warner Theater, it's called Me the People. Obviously before the election, but all the same stuff's going on, January 6th, Mar-a-Lago, all this was already happening. So you can comment on all of it. So what sort of timely topics do you actually delve into, without spoiling any punchlines?
Well, first of all, I know some people are only listening and not watching, so they'll have to forgive what I'm about to show here. It's just a screenshot from the show. But when Trump was look, this is what I think. The trouble with comedy right now is that everybody's being canceled and judged and or vice versa, judged and then canceled. And you don't have to be a comedian. You can be anybody, say the wrong thing and you're done. We all know this.
It's a tricky time for comedians. Yes,
it is. But the luxury of being where I am now is I have an audience who understands what I'm doing and they're okay with it. But I also think there's a line that I think too many comedians have crossed pretty much since Trump got in office. And that is that, it used to be all the way back to Will Rogers and then Bob Hope and then Carson and then even Leno. You never knew what their politics were. And they never picked a side. And they made fun of both sides equally. And everybody was okay with that. But there are also people I think were more okay with it because these guys didn't go for the jugular. They weren't mean and nasty about it, and they weren't calling names. They didn't group everybody into, those groups. And Leno and I have had that conversation that, you make fun of the one person, you don't make fun of a group of people. And so that's what I try and do is that I'm just making fun of what's going on. And I think I have an audience that gets that and understands it. So when it comes to the canceling, I would hate to be a new guy on the comedy scene that nobody knows who you are and you don't have fans that support you. Because it would be very difficult right now. But I do draw that line. I think anybody from any side of politics can come in and watch my show and go, okay, that was funny. Yeah, he's making fun of that stuff and he's not making me look like an idiot. Because when Trump was in office, I had a lot of fun with that. Walter, my grumpy old curmudgeonly guy, we had him. He was in some of our YouTube videos. He was Grump, where he was, had the hair and the whole thing. And then I even created a character called Larry, who was Trump's personal advisor. And of course, that guy was just a mess. He was just stressed out, and now, we've got another guy in office. And again, for the people watching, this is a shot from the show. But you can see Walter. People said that Walter looks just like Biden, and I embrace that. So you can see Walter. He's in the Oval Office, and he looks a lot like Biden.
So Walter has played both Donald Trump and Joe Biden in recent years.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, I would love to go into, some of your famous characters, and you can touch on how they've evolved over the years in the current climate, or whatever you want to add. But I would love to sort of go as chronologically as we can. Like, where did you grow up? How did you get into ventriloquism?
Ventriloquism, yeah. I was in the third grade, and I saw a dummy in a toy store, and in fact he's sitting right over there. That's the little guy with the hat on. That's the first dummy I ever had. A little a plastic vinyl Mortimer Snurd, who was a character of another famous ventriloquist back in the radio era. But
and you're cropping him out of the shot.
Whoops! Hold on, there he is.
There we go. There we
go. All right. But now, wait a minute.
You used to be important to me, kid. Now,
but now the shelf is off center. Jason,
no, it's okay. You can pivot back. It's fine. I'm just messing with you.
I gotta even it out. Now I'm there. That's much better.
You're a memory to me now.
Oh, yeah, right up here. You can see the M16 machine gun right there.
Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff.
That was my favorite toy when I was a kid. That was during the Vietnam era, and that was an awesome gun. That hey, when I was a kid, that's all we did was we had gunfights. So
right, you're surrounded by your childhood. But all right. Anyway, sorry, I was just messing with you. So you were born in Dallas, Texas, and how did you get into it?
I saw that little dummy in the toy store one year, about a month before Christmas, and Mom and I were wandering through the toy store, and I just, like any little kid, Mom, I want this. She's like, yeah, put it back. And sure enough, Santa Claus must have heard that because it was under the tree that year. And I got a book on ventriloquism, and I still have that library book. It's also right over there that I never returned. But I did a show in Dallas, one of the American Airlines, whatever the big arena is there, and we had somebody from the Dallas Public Library come, and we figured out what the fine would have been from 1970 when I checked out the book, and I actually gave him, I paid the fine, and then actually paid for the book. I wouldn't give him the book back, and then gave the library an extra 10 grand. So
you're lucky it wasn't the Seinfeld. They didn't send Bookman after you. You know what I mean? The library cop. Rest in peace.
Yep, that's right. So anyway, I just started doing shows in the third grade, and book reports and Cub Scout banquets and shows at church, and then all through junior high and high school. And I think the reason I didn't get beat up a lot or at all is because I didn't have any brothers and sisters to tell me that what I was doing was really lame. But I also think there was a level of acceptance there because on stage, even in grade school, I was making fun of the teachers and the coaches and the lunch ladies and the food. And so, I was saying stuff that nobody else could say. And that's carried on into now because of what I love about what I do is that I can point and counterpoint. And hopefully people walk out of the show not really knowing exactly where I am politically or on whatever, because if the character says one thing, I can then counterpoint and argue the other way. So it's Perfect. Just, good comedy is creating conflict and tension. And that's what I can do on stage with characters and between myself and them. So I just kept going and went to Baylor University, graduated with a BA in radio, TV, and film. Moved out to Los Angeles in late '88 and started doing the comedy clubs around the country. Got booked on The Tonight Show, did that a handful of times with Carson, and then on the Leno, and then a bunch of specials, and here we are.
Wow. So getting to do Johnny Carson, that must have been a dream. I'm sure you grew up watching him, and it's cool too. Like you're saying, like in as a kid, like you could make fun of the teachers and people, but since it's ventriloquism, you could probably keep your mouth shut and throw the voice and know him. Be like, who said that? It was Jeff in the back of the class.
Well, it was more that I don't think the teachers knew what to think because here I was, a kid and doing pretty well. And I would always get A's on the oral reports and all that stuff. And I just felt like, even back then, I felt like it was cheating a little bit just because I had this
Right.
skill of ventriloquism.
Yeah.
Didn't mean that I was any more, any better I hadn't read the book or done a report any better than anyone else. It's just that I happened to have the report coming out of the dummy.
It was
So
a cooler gimmick, you know.
I guess that's what it was. I'm not sure.
Did I read somewhere on that you performed for Roger Staubach in those early Dallas days?
Oh yeah, that was my junior high years. So there was this camp that I would go to every summer, and I eventually started working at the camp. It was called Sky Ranch. It still is there. It's great. There are actually a few camps around the country. It's a non-denominational Christian camp, and so I would do shows at camp, and they were, the Sky Ranch was always fundraising, and they said, we have these fundraising banquets in Dallas. So could you come as a camper and just show as an example of the product of this camp what happens and bring your dummies and just entertain us a little bit? I'm like, okay. And here I was in seventh and eighth grade. So I'd never done really any corporate shows. So I thought, I said to him, I go, maybe you guys should do what I've been doing. Can I get some names of some of the people that are going to be there? And I'll just make some jokes about them. And so a couple of banquets, Roger Staubach, who was, the star quarterback of the Cowboys in the late 70s, he was at a couple of banquets, and there's this 13-year-old kid on stage making fun of him. It'd be like, Mr. Staubach, it's good to see you here. How's the season going? Oh, maybe you should be out practicing.
Hey, us Washington, D.C. football fans, we love that. They were our rivals, so we probably would have appreciated that.
That's right.
That's awesome. Well, I just had to ask you about that. That's hilarious. Well, what was it like? You mentioned it. Let's loop back around. What was it like getting to be on the Tonight Show with Carson? Like, do you remember did you have Walter with you at that point?
Yeah. No, that was an epic night. I'll try and make this short. So I moved to LA in late 88, like September of 88, September of 88. And I had been going back and forth to Los Angeles to try my, dip my toe in the water of the comedy clubs, because I really hadn't worked comedy clubs living in Texas. And so I would go out there, and Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach, California, the guy named Mike Lacey that owned and ran the place, he let me on stage a few times, and he kept telling me, you need to be on the Tonight Show. I need to get Jim McCauley here, the guy that booked all the comics for Carson. And so he kept saying that, and that started in 86 when I was really doing the clubs. Then finally I moved there in 88. Jim McCauley had seen me a few times. He kept telling me, no, you're just not ready. You're just not funny enough. And that started back in 86, my first audition. So I auditioned for the Tonight Show however many times. And then in December of 88, McCauley said, you're ready. Saw me the Comedy Magic Club. He said, that's great. He says, we'll have you on in like late December, right before Christmas. And he said, I'm going to come back one more time to see you the night before and make sure you're ready, make any tweaks, any adjustments. So that was, 2 or 3 weeks before I was going to be on. Went back to Texas, bought the $1,000 suit, told all my friends I was in TV Guide, going to be on. Then Jim McCauley came and saw me at the Comedy Magic Club the night before I was supposed to tape with Carson the next day. He left early, and he called me the next morning. He said, Jeff, I got to tell you, I made a mistake. You're just not ready. And I had set a goal when I graduated from high school in spring of 1980. I gave myself 10 years to be on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And I knew that would entail a lot, going through college and working my way. So 10 years. So this was fall of 88. I had been booked, and then literally had the carpet ripped out from under me. And that had been my goal for almost a decade, for 8 years, to be on that show. And then he said, no, you're not ready. And he said, trust me, when it comes to being on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, it's better to be 5 years late than 1 day early. And I've applied that to everything in life. Yeah. Just don't get in a hurry. Just make sure that you're ready when this opportunity comes. And so I kept doing shows, and I ended up auditioning for the Tonight Show nine times, and I got 8 no's from McCauley. You're not ready. You're not ready. You're not ready. And finally, he came to the place called the Ice House in Pasadena. He saw me, and the show went great. I killed. I go, I don't know what I'm doing, how I can do this any better. He walked out in the parking lot, and he goes, okay, you got it. I go, I do? He goes, yep.
The ninth time was the charm.
Yeah, and what's crazy is I graduated in May of 1980, gave myself 10 years. I was on The Tonight Show in April of 1990. So I made it by 1 month, that 10-year
Down
goal.
to the wire. You
Yeah.
talking
Yeah. And then
about.
what's amazing, that first time it was with Carson, Friday night was the night to be on. That was his favorite night. That's when the audience was hottest because they knew it was his night.
Right.
And that night, there were two other guests. It was me, Bob Hope, and BB King.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, so it was an amazing night, and yeah, and I did fine with my act, and it was with Peanut and Jose Jalapeno on a stick. But then the magic came when uh, I got waved over to the couch, and that never happened your first time on with Carson. But
That's when
waved.
you know you've made it. He liked it. He thought it was funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and Freddie DeCordova, the executive producer, he had told me, he goes, "Don't you have another character?" And I go, "Yeah, I have Walter." He goes, "Why don't you put that behind the couch?" I go, "For what?" He goes, "Just in case Johnny calls you over. I think he's gonna
Whoa.
like you." I'm like, "No, that's not gonna happen." He goes, "Just trust me. Just put him behind." So I put Walter behind the couch. Johnny called me over. I sat down. We, talked a little bit. And he goes, "Don't you have somebody else?" And I pulled out Walter, and then that's when the magic really happened, because Walter comes out and he goes, I go, "Walter, you know where we are?" He goes, "Yeah, I know where we are. I don't give a damn." And he looks over at Carson. And I go, "Don't you know this guy?" He goes, "Yeah, it's my wife's first husband."
That Walter, that rascal.
Yeah. Then he looks over at Ed McMahon. Now, Ed McMahon at that time was the spokesperson for Publishers Clearinghouse. You know what that is?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, they would like give away the
the sweepstakes. Yeah,
money.
he was
Yeah.
always doing the commercials. And Walter looks over at him and he goes, "Hey, don't you have some letters to write?"
I
Carson
like
loves
that
it.
you're talking about him like in the third person, not like
Well, I
I
have
came
to.
up.
No, I have to, because, and that's anybody that starts working for me, eventually they drink the Kool-Aid, because you can't
Right.
say over and over, when you made Walter say. No, it's
Right.
when Walter said.
I
So
like
then
that.
the cherry on top of the whole night, though, is at the end, we go to commercial break, and I actually turned to Johnny and I said, "Mr. Carson, if it's okay, could you thank me for coming? Because I have a joke." And he goes, "Yeah, whatever. I'll thank you for coming. No
Sure.
problem." So he turns to me at the end of the show. He goes, "We've had a great night, blah blah blah." And Walter, he turned to Walter and he goes, "Walter, I hope we'll see you again."
Yeah.
And Walter turned to Carson and goes, "Oh yeah, it'd be a cold day in hell before you get me back to this damn show." And
Did he lose it? Did he?
yeah, that's Johnny Carson. And here I was, basically a kid, telling Johnny Carson it'd be a cold day in hell. And yeah, Carson actually laughed really hard and he goes, "That was perfect." So yeah.
No, that's
was
hilarious. And to your point, that's you as just Jeff Dunham could not have said that to Carson, but the fact that you have this alter ego saying it, it's perfect. You can bust his balls. It was great.
Yeah, and then I apologize. I'm sorry. I did.
Yeah.
Not my fault.
The split personality. It's so great. You can play both sides. That's awesome. And Bob Hope and BB King. I mean, come on. That's awesome. Well, all right. Well, let's get, thank you so much. I'm glad we covered your backstory and everything, but 11 Comedy Central specials later, I want to go at least into a little bit when people come, what kind of characters they're going to see. And I don't know if you have any of them there with you, but is Walter there at the moment?
Yeah, hold on. It's not 11 Comedy Central specials. It's I think 8 Comedy Central specials, 1 NBC special, and 2 Netflix specials.
All right, 11 total then.
So we've come all the way back to Comedy Central.
Welcome back.
I'm hoping to get a big number for them, because I guess they're, well, anyway, I think they'd appreciate a big number. I still hold some of the records there, by the way. I don't think they'll ever be broken. They're some of their biggest numbers ever for premiere of a show and stand-up specials. I've got a very loyal, amazing fan base, so it's kind of fun.
Awesome. Well, can you give us a hint of which characters might we see that you filmed at the Warner Theater right here in DC? We tune into Comedy Central on November 25th. Who are we going to see?
Well, there's always a Peanut, the little purple guy. He's kind of nuts. And there's Earl is the new guy. So during the pandemic, like I said, I'd never, all the years that I've been doing shows since the 3rd grade, I had never gone, in all those years, never had gone more than 2 weeks without doing a show, except for my honeymoon. Took a month off. But so when the pandemic hit, it was like, what the hell am I supposed to do? So I decided to do some Facebook Lives and some YouTube Lives, and then turn them into regular YouTube videos where I showed people how to build a character, how I create them. And we did those videos and created a character who's a younger guy who's stuck on his smart device a little too much of the time, and generation gap there for sure. And his name, we had a naming contest by fans, and they named him one guy named him Earl, but it's spelled URL. So that guy's going to be in the show.
And he's got like a beanie and like a little like an earpiece or AirPod or something in.
Well, he got his what are those called? AirPods, yeah. Right.
AirPods. Well, I didn't know if you had any of the characters with you, if they wanted to make an appearance on this call. If not, that's totally cool. But oh my gosh, Walter is here. Now, is that Joe Biden or is that Donald Trump or is that just regular Walter?
No, I'm just Walter. Who cares? Jason, is it? It's good to see you, Jason. Yes, thanks for having us on here.
Yeah, your buddy Jeff was just telling us about how you told off Johnny Carson, and that takes some balls, Walter.
Not my buddy, he's my employer.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. I don't care. Yeah.
Well, what was Carson like?
Oh, we're talking about Carson? Don't want to talk about anything new? Oh, fine. Carson was great. Yay.
All right, fine. Talk about something new. What was it like when you impersonate Donald Trump versus Joe Biden? Like, how do you go back and forth between? They're very different people.
Very different folks, yeah. Well, the good part about being Joe Biden, I didn't have to do anything with my hair except dye it gray, right? Yeah.
Well, we had a big old coif for Trump. It was pretty great. One of the videos we're outside and it actually blows up and, flies open like it's a big toupee, like it should, like everybody expects when Trump's in the wind. How has that thing not done that?
And that was a punchline long before he ran for office. That the hair was always a comedian go-to right there. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then what about when you're doing Biden? I mean, how's that different than doing Trump? I mean, the two ran against each other. They were mortal enemies, and you play them both.
Well, being Trump, you say things that are inflammatory and ridiculous. And when you're Biden, you say things that make absolutely no sense whatsoever.
it is kind of the truth.
Yeah, non sequiturs, just sentences that don't go anywhere, and then references that make no sense whatsoever. That's it. Trump, you just say things that pisses folks off and are over the top and nuts. Right? Yeah.
You know what, Jason? We've never been asked that question, but that's actually. I'm gonna have to remember this.
I'll remember it. Don't worry. Okay. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, good question.
You've never been asked that question. I find that.
No, I've never been asked it. I guess because we haven't really talked about, these interviews for this special coming up are just now starting, and I haven't really talked about how Walter is Biden. But yeah, when you compare it to the Trump thing, it's really different. It's completely different, the comedy.
Talk about some of the other characters. Like, so Jose Jalapeno on a Stick was so famous, and Ahmed the Dead Terrorist came out, after 9/11 was one thing. And nowadays, I'm sure you've gotten some pushback from some camps about doing those characters. But Walter and Jeff, like, what's it like trying to evolve those characters in our current, culture now?
All right, why don't you talk about Ahmed first?
Okay, Ahmed. Yeah, folks get all this. Oh, it's Ahmed the Dead Terrorist, and they can fun of folks. Okay, so you tell them. I don't care.
So, if it kind of makes me laugh because if anybody's going to get upset with Ahmed, he was my answer to 9/11, and so a year after 9/11, there's nothing to make fun of. There's nothing funny about 9/11. But I looked to Leno and Letterman, and they were making fun of those guys and Osama bin Laden, and we hadn't found him yet, and so making fun of those guys. So I said, I know where Osama bin Laden is. He's dead, and he's hiding in the suitcase in the trunk with all my characters. So I went to the store and I bought this little plastic bumbling skeleton and made him into the dead Osama. And I wanted to make sure that this was going to work, and I wrote jokes imagining that there were family members in the audience that had lost people directly from 9/11. And a year later, what would they be ready to laugh at? What would help them move forward, and what would make the rest of the country laugh as well? I wrote those jokes, did that material, and then I thought, I'm not going to go to Alaska or Hawaii or someplace as far away as possible to try it out. I'm going to do this right where it counts. And so I got booked at a comedy club called Bananas, 6 miles from Ground Zero, and did the show. And I was fairly well known then in the comedy world. In comedy clubs, I was doing great. Sold out on a Friday night was the first show, and did my 45, 50 minutes of my regular characters. And then I said, well, folks, there's one sentence we've all been waiting to hear, and that is Osama bin Laden is dead. And of course, the crowd went crazy. And I said, well, I got to tell you, we have a special guest tonight. I think I found him. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Osama bin Laden.
All the way from Abbottabad, Pakistan.
Exactly. But it was like God put a big vacuum cleaner and sucked all the air out of that room. It was completely quiet, because I know those people were thinking, what is this a-hole from California
Right.
brought us now. And I pulled out this bumbling skeleton and ad-libbed the "I kill you" for the very first time, went through the jokes, and it couldn't have gone better. And then it just kept growing after that, and more and more shows. I then put him away for a couple of years, and then brought him back for my next special, which was Spark of Insanity at the Warner Theater in DC, and brought him out on stage and went through his initial routine. And again, just amazing response. It took off. The YouTube videos went crazy. Started getting letters from the military and the military folks' families thanking me for this, and they started using him as nose art on aircraft, all that kind of stuff. It was just nuts. So
he will be here in this special that's about to air.
He was at the Warner Theater that night. He certainly was at the Warner Theater during the show.
All right. So for you as a comedian, the nuanced needle to thread, like you were saying earlier, is you said you can't make fun of the bigger group of, we're not making fun of all Muslim Americans. You're targeting actual bin Laden, and make fun of a specific person is how you do comedy.
Yeah, and I make it my whole point with all that was he was embraced by the country, and now. And then in 2016, I did another Comedy Central special called All Over the Map, which we literally went all over the map. We went to, I don't know how many different continents and countries and everywhere, all the way from, from here to Canada, to Iceland, to South Africa, to Australia, to Singapore, to the Middle East. So my point was, though, here I was in the middle of the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, doing a show for 4,000 Muslims. And who was there, all in the dish dash outfit, the men, the women, all in black, and the men all in white. Who was their favorite character? Ahmed the Dead Terrorist. Then this is how crazy the world is, how great the world is when you look at it from a certain perspective. 2 nights later, I'm in the middle of Tel Aviv, Israel, doing the exact same show for 4,000 Jewish people. And guess who their favorite character was? Ahmed the Dead Terrorist. So
it crossed both lines, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm doing the exact same show. I didn't change a word of it. And so my point since then, that was one of those moments that standing on stage, you're able to think even while you're doing your act. And it was like, how in the world did this happen? How is this happening? It was almost a tearjerker kind of time to see that happening, because comedy is so universal. We all laugh at the same things. We all have the same problems. It's family and job and food on the table and relatives and all those universal themes that we can all joke about. And that's what I did. And so anybody who has a problem with Ahmed the Dead Terrorist, it's usually someone who has nothing to do with being any part of the group of people that might be concerned about him.
Right. And
yeah.
Same with Jose Jalapeno?
Yeah, Jose Jalapeno on a stick. Oh, man. Never, ever have I ever had a Hispanic person complain about Jose Jalapeno on a stick. It's, in fact, if he's for a year or two when I left him out of the show, people were upset. And I have so many Hispanic people saying that he's their favorite character. And it's because I'm not making fun of anybody. He's a jalapeno on a stick with a Mexican accent, and he picks on Peanut every much as Peanut picks on him. And usually he has the upper stick.
The upper hand.
So yeah, there's, and you
got Bubba J. You make fun of, redneck white people. You had a couple white guys here, but yeah, you make fun of Bubba J too.
Well, I think I'm okay with that, because basically that's where I grew up and how I grew up. So I understand the redneck thing very well, because I grew up in Texas. And yeah, but you know what? Even when Walter was coming along, even when I put Walter in the show, people were like, "Oh no, old people are going to think you're making fun of them." And we do. No, we don't. Yes, we do. Oh, yes. Well, anyway. So,
well, you can't just come on. I would thank you for being open and honest, because you can't just go on stage and say, "Well, I can't talk about anything. Back to you." I mean, you have to have material. So it's about trying to do it respectfully, nuanced, targeted. Yeah. Like, thank you for explaining that. It's got to be a tricky time to do it. Well, you've been hilarious over the years. And Walter, sorry we got talking. I mean, I feel like we left you out of the conversation here. You just
I don't really care, Jason. I'm just sitting here on a desk next to Jeff, and it's just fascinating. And you have a much nicer background than Jeff does. It's tasteful. You have one photo there or something. It's like
that's all that's my wife, Ashley. She decorated all this, so.
Oh, she did. Okay, good, because it's very tasteful. You look behind Jeff, it looks like Walt Disney threw up.
Well, one of those pieces of vomit, he introduced me to his first ventriloquist dummy. Have you met?
Oh, that piece of crap over on the wall. Yeah, that's great.
He's out of the frame now. You know, we don't show him anymore.
Of course not. Don't do that. Yeah.
Before we run, Walter, do you have any favorite characters other than yourself? You're not allowed to say yourself. What are the other characters like when you're hanging out with them, you know, in the truck or in the back of the van or whatever?
Well, I'll just run through. And Peanut is just he's an idiot like on I don't know what he is. A dummy on crack? No, we don't know what he is. We don't know where he's from. No one cares. And then there's Brother J, the white trash trailer park guy. You know, he's okay to hang out with, but he drinks a little too much. Then there's Ahmed, the dead terrorist. He's a terrorist, for God's sakes. You tell me, Jason, I'm running down the list. Who would you want to hang out with? Who would be none of the above?
I would hang out with you, Walter, because you seem like a distinguished gentleman. I love your haircut and the bow tie.
Well, thanks, Jason. Now I feel that. He said something nice about me. Yeah. Okay, fine, great. Thanks a lot. Well, Jason, you should come out to one of our shows. We'll be heading back to DC sometime soon.
Yeah, exactly. But until then, you can see the historic Warner Theater here in DC. You can see it on the Comedy Central special. It's going to air on Friday, November 25th. So, you know, if you got family in town, the whole Thanksgiving weekend, you know what I mean? Like, come check. You got to tune in and check it out.
And people ask us, is the show, is my live show, is the special, is it family friendly? And then, Walter, what's the answer?
It depends on your family.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, if you got a Jeff Foxworthy family, they might like Bubba. It depends what your family is, you know what I mean?
But by the way, I was very cognizant this time. I have 7-year-old twin boys, and I was very cognizant of what would I at Thanksgiving time be okay with sitting down with the family to watch. And so I think what we ended up with on Comedy Special, I think everybody can sit down. It's got some edge to it, but I think Grandma and the kids will be okay.
Yeah, watch your Macy's Parade and your It's a Wonderful Life, and then the next day on Black Friday,
there you go.
Come home from shopping and check in with Walter here.
That's perfect.
All right, well, I really appreciate you making so much time for us and bringing on the puppets. Sorry, Walter, you're a real person. Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't mean to call you a puppet. You know,
it's okay. It's just fine, Jason. I understand.
Walter, what's it like having a guy's hand up your? You know what?
Oh, do we have to go there now?
He's like, I thought we were signing off.
No. He has soft hands. It's okay.
Yeah, I hope he trimmed his nails.
He lost his watch.
What is this, Pulp Fiction?
That's actually one of the bits in the show where Peanut says he found my watch.
I love it.
That made it in the special. So.
Oh man, yeah. Well, you go. Yeah, I think that's the perfect place to leave it. The soft hand.
A hand up the ass joke. That's good. Good night, everybody.
Can't talk that. That's all right. See you at it. Like Jerry Seinfeld, he had to leave. Or no, that was Costanza. That's all right. I'm out of here. All right. Hey, thanks so much, Jeff Dunham. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the time. See you soon, Jason.
All right, later. See you, Walter.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.
Explain your DNA on 10 cases, man.
You're inside the police interrogation room with the alleged Potomac River rapist.
I'm not guilty on any of this stuff.
So calm, so reasonable. Could this be the man who terrorized women for 9 years before murdering a brilliant scientist 2 decades ago? Experience one of the most fascinating true crime podcasts available. Join crime reporter Paul Wagner for Unknown Subject, Season 3 of WTOP's American Nightmare series. Search American Nightmare Podcast on all podcast platforms.
I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.